Hello and welcome to this SlimDevOps Live episode 54, I believe. If you're watching this after the fact on YouTube, this was originally streamed on twitch.tv/SlimDevOps. So if you're not following us there, come and follow us over there on twitch.tv/SlimDevOps. And whilst you're on YouTube, do all those internet things, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. So today we have a new face here on the stream. It's Stephen Cicchino. Welcome to the stream, Stephen. How are you?
Good, Martin. Doing well. Happy to be on my first stream with SlimDevOps.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for joining me. I see we've got a number of our friends already in the chat. So hello to Danny, Phil, and Pete. Welcome back. And there's a few others lurking as well. Hello to those of you that are lurking in the chat. So, Stephen, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're here at Slim working on?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going into my third year of computer science at Northeastern. So I'm doing a developer relations co-op here, having a lot of fun and learning a ton about containers. I'm mainly right now working on some container example repositories that we have going. And I'm doing some other kind of side projects that I guess we'll talk about later on the stream.
Yeah, we'll touch on all of that. So I believe what you're actually doing is adding some polish and finesse to some of the shonky projects that Pete and I have created during various live streams over the last year or so. So we'll take a look at what you've been doing with all of those. But I'm also interested to sort of learn more about your journey with containers. So what was your first introduction to containers?
Yeah, so it was probably 5 or 6 years ago. I was in high school and I was in this online coding competition run every year by MIT called Battle Code. And in it, you make your sort of bot to play some generic every year they make a new unique RTS game sort of. And I remember to run this game and practice your bot on your device, you needed a Docker container. And at the time I was probably 3 months out from my first Python hello world app ever. So all of this container technology seemed like a little bit witchcraft to me, and I offloaded as much as I could onto my kind of more experienced teammates at the time. Yeah.
So you were focusing on the actual sort of coding implementation of this rather than the sort of delivery mechanism. Okay. So I've shared a link to that in the in the chat, and I've just put it up on the screen briefly. So that was your very first introductions to There we go. That was your very first introductions to containers. But as you just said, it was really a glimpse. So obviously, Slim.AI, we're very much container enthusiasts here. What have you been working on in order to sort of learn more about containers whilst you've been here?
Right. So I had some more kind of similar glimpses where in the past before coming here, where I just tried to stick to the exact instructions and docs as much as I could. But yeah, from here I've been, like you said, looking back at some of the unfinished projects of Pete and yours, which have been some of them as simple as single endpoint hello world apps, and I've been spinning those up and then seeing how I could use Docker Slim or our new features on our SaaS platform to optimize those. And then I've reached out in the past couple of weeks into some more simple apps, and then some more robust web apps. And in my side projects, I'm looking into some image generation, some emulation stuff.
Okay. So are you ready to share your screen? Because I think you've got several examples which you've really gone quite deep on.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Right, so this right here is where the most of the examples I've been working on are housed. You know, right here. You'll see these 6 are the ones I've been working on. You'll recognize a few, Martin. This one right here is the node hello world, which is sort of the first one I got working. And again, you and Peter started on this one, I believe.
I believe it was Pete, yeah,
Just
because
Pete on
I
this one.
was a bit like you were
Mhm.
discussing earlier, sort of, almost being a passenger. It had been such a long time I'd done anything
Mhm.
serious with Node other than minor modifications to existing code.
Mhm.
Pete really sort of ran with Node in the early days, and I was just sort
Mm.
of there to observe and learn and catch up on using Node, again.
Yeah. So I was pretty happy with the results on this one. We were able to get like 10 times minify, and I think this is one that I used the actual Docker Slim CLI for, and not the platform.
Right,
Um,
okay. So what are those, what's in that table there? There was some, if you just scroll back up there.
right. So this
So,
is summary of the original image versus Slim image on the scans we were able to do. Um, push time, scan time, and size. You can see the improvements on that.
nice.
Hmm.
So that's very interesting. So it, I think it says there, did you use Gripe locally to do those vulnerability scans, or did you use the SaaS platform?
Oh gosh, on this one, I believe it was Gripe. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Hmm. Um, yeah. So I mean, going through it, this was just a basic walkthrough for any kind of beginner who could follow to how to run through it in Slim. And then we'll see a similar example was the next one I kind of worked on was, yeah, a Rust container. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
So this is very interesting. So there's a few things I'm interested in looking at here. First of all, that
Mhm.
Rust container, that is a colossal reduction in size, one of the larger ones there. So I'm surprised that we started with a container for Rust that was 1.5 gig. That's probably on me and Pete. But you got that down to 10 meg.
Yeah, it was just Rust latest.
Right.
Uh, yeah, I imagine there would be smaller base images we could have started with, but it makes for a good table, I'd say. If you're going down from the almost 1.5 gigabytes to the 10 megabytes and maintaining the whole functionality. This app was a guessing game, by the way. It was like the one of the first examples in the like Rust docs for um, making any kind of Rust app.
Yeah, I remember Pete working. Pardon me. I remember Pete working on this. Um, I believe this was Pete sort of going through the motions of properly learning Rust for the first time, and was
Hmm.
going through a number of tutorials. He was very enthusiastic about it, as I remember.
Yeah, I kind of had a funny experience with this one, where when I was first spinning it up, I had the sort of death of using the game loop using my entire CPU to output please input your guess to standard in or standard out as fast as it could, and there was kind of a battle between internally of am I misunderstanding the Rust or am I misunderstanding the Docker, because
Right.
neither were things at this point that I was fully familiar with,
And
and I'm
which did
looking
it
at
turn out to be?
it was misunderstanding the Docker. Like I was looking at the back and forth on the Rust docs between what I had and and what was there, and I'm like, it's the exact same unless there was some crucial change to Rust since this docs. It's got to be the Docker, and I found it. It was as simple as like a missing like interactive tag
Ah,
on the
right.
Docker run. Yeah. Um, which I'm sure is something that anybody experienced with Docker could pick up right away. But given this was in my first couple weeks of really trying to learn Docker, it was
I
Uh,
don't think so, because unless you're like shelling into a container, it's not something you often do, right? This is
mhm,
not a service or a daemon or anything. This is
mhm.
a command line, a terminal application.
Yeah, full
So
terminal.
yes, hence the requirement for the interactive flag.
Mhm.
When you were working with the Node stuff, did you run into any bear traps when you were working with the Node container?
Yes, it resolved a lot quicker than this one, because I was sure there was nothing wrong with the node. I really just didn't realize the need for exposing the ports
Right,
on it. Um, I didn't, after reading the docs, so I understood, binding the container ports to the host ports, um, which was one of the first things that I probably learned about Docker.
right.
Yeah.
And well, so did you slim either of these with the SaaS platform, or were these both with Docker Slim at this point?
These both were with Docker Slim at this point, I believe. Yes.
And how
I
how
did.
did you find sort of your introduction to Docker Slim itself?
Yeah. So I mean, these were both very like straightforward jobs with the Docker Slim CLI. Like once I got it installed and set up properly, it really, I mean, I don't think I had to go much deeper than just the Docker Slim build, and maybe I had to disable the probe on the Rust one, the HTTP probe.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I don't think I mean, I think I got these both minimized pretty significantly without more than like one or two flags on it. Yeah.
Excellent. And
Mhm.
what were your references when you were sort of getting started with Docker Slim? What were you using as your reference to figure out the incantations to use with Docker Slim?
Well, I guess fortunately, there was an example somewhere. Uh, when possible, usually I try to learn by example as opposed to docs, which often will have its pitfalls, but I found that to be the quickest way.
Okay,
Uh, though I did uh, often use the docs on GitHub just to search up the different flags and make sure I wasn't missing anything.
excellent.
Mhm.
Okay, so and I think there was another example that you'd got there that you've been working
Mhm.
on and improving. Which one was that?
Right. So there were a few more, but this was the one I
Okay,
wanted to show.
okay,
So this actually isn't this is the repository I got the code from this app. So this was an app being run on um Node, a Node image, and it's contentful, which looks like this. It's a pretty, it was just an example app that they have publicly available. And
okay,
I took the code into examples, and I wanted to move it on from I wanted to make a build rather than on the Node image on the Circle CI Node image, which was
okay.
managed. Um, so I copied it onto ours and made some modifications to the Docker file, which actually taught me a good amount. I think this might be one of the ones I learned the most from, um, because my initial approach was take the node Docker file, replace the from node with the CIMG node tag, and that quickly failed for multiple reasons. One of them being it did not have the node user on this image. Uh,
Ah, right. Okay, interesting.
and then the other being that it didn't default to having root privileges, so the npm installs were failing.
Right.
Uh, so I had to do some investigations, and that led to me. First, I was able to get the build operating just by give everything root, right? Which I knew I didn't want my final production container to look like. Um, so I had to do a little more investigation, trying to find from the docs, like, how to add a user with the proper permissions. But what I actually found and ended up going with I hadn't even thought before to use the I think it was the Docker inspect to look at the metadata for the base image and find that there was an installed user just called Circle CI, which I could set it to end and get everything operating properly.
Okay. Oh, I see. Okay, interesting. So
Mhm.
I've got a couple of questions here. What what was your sort of rationale for switching to the Circle CI node image in the first place?
Well, I know Circle CI is a um, company that Slim wants to work with. So we've been kind of Peter and I have kind of been looking around at companies that are managing their own images and publishing them, and we thought it would be good practice to get some use out of these,
I
see how they operate on the different like running similar apps for their use cases, and then comparing them against the original base images and seeing how Docker Slim, or in this case I slimmed using the this was the first one I slimmed using the SaaS platform, I believe,
Okay.
and it was able to get to about where's the table? It was about to get, yeah, it was from 1.6 gigabytes to 102 megabytes
That's impressive.
um,
Those are good numbers.
for a much
And I
bigger
think
app than the
and I think
Rust.
what you're running here, this example app, is that container that you're running locally, right?
Yeah, this is local.
Right.
Um, yeah, this is just the container spun up. Um,
So this is interesting. Um, when you made that sort of transition to using the Slim SaaS platform to do the
mhm.
minification, how was that sort of transition from Docker Slim? What were the differences that you had to account for, if any?
Yeah, so I mean, uh, so I guess the SaaS platform had like the setup wizard uh, on it, which made it more of a directed walkthrough, which actually meant a lot of less thinking on my
Right.
part. With limited options in front of me, I was kind of able to. It might have been. It wasn't on the first run that I got it to work. I forget
It
which
never
flag
is.
I. Yeah, that'll be a. We'll have to make a holiday out of that the first time anything works on the first try uh, with containers. But um, yeah, it was pretty straightforward. I just selected server application. I had to expose the port, and I mean it generated. Yep,
So
generated the image, outputted it directly to my container registry.
So no need to manipulate the probes or includes at all for this.
No, I didn't
Wow,
have to add any includes. Nope.
excellent.
Um,
So I can see that some other friends of Slim.AI have joined. So hello Phil, hello Graham, hello our podcast, and Primosh, welcome. Now our podcast, as you can probably tell by the name, that's Eric, and Eric is the presenter for the Erlang podcast, and I think you've got an Erlang example in here that you've been polishing recently
mm,
as well. Is that right?
right. Yeah. This was the R shiny one.
So I
Um,
should let you know that it was Eric that
mhm,
created that initial example, and this was at a time where we didn't have a platform at all.
mhm.
And Docker Slim broke this image, so I'd be interested to see like what your
Oh, really?
experiences were working with this. Yeah.
Uh, wow. What this was? Let me think back to this. Yeah, it was up 1.4 gigabytes about to 250 megabytes. Most of this write-up was here already. When I started working on it, I just got the Slim to work and got the data in there. Uh, I'm trying to. I mean, you said it failed initially with Docker Slim.
I think by the
I.
time you picked it up, it was
Mhm.
probably in a semi-working state. But we were using very embryonic versions of our
Oh,
platform that were not public in order to do that initial debugging in order to assist Eric with the process of minifying an Rlang container.
Right. Okay, now you've reminded me that I haven't finished polishing up this README yet. I might have to push that change up. I'm not sure if I have it locally, but this has right. So this was right. I remember now. This was the full Docker Slim command that we needed to get it slimmed. This is the one I used.
Right.
So if we look closely into it, I mean, disable the probe, publish port, include path file. Okay. Yeah, I mean, so it didn't seem like this one, yeah, it wasn't really too much modification. I guess the include path file may have taken a bit of time to whoever identified that. But yeah, when I spun this up, I just used the build command given here.
Yeah, yeah. So I can see there's some comments there. So Eric and Pete are enjoying the nostalgia of the very early raw days of us, working on this stuff. And Big Pod is pointing out that these were the early examples, some of which is in the Docker Slim GitHub repository as well. There are some examples for different language ecosystems there that I think Big Pod did some work on about 6 or 8 months ago now, probably. But it's interesting looking back at this and also reflecting on how far the platform has come. We're not going to do a platform demonstration today because I think most of the people that are here are aware of the platform and Docker Slim and our relationship between Slim.AI and Docker Slim. I was really interested in sort of hearing your account of sort of leveling up your skills with containers and slimming and what that journey was like in different language ecosystems. So that's been interesting to me, particularly the piece with the Circle CI based images. I think that's something I'm very interested in taking a look at after my vacation time, which is coming up. But I think you've got some personal interests that have sort of overflowed into the container world as well.
Do we lose audio?
Well, I don't know. Can you hear me?
I just lost your audio for about 5 or 10 seconds, but I can hear you again now.
I think that was an internet glitch, so I'll restate my question. So I think that you've got some personal interests as well that have sort of overflowed into the container world.
Yeah, so I kind of have 2 main side projects right now. One of them, I have to give most of the credit to Mac, who's one of our community members, who I'm not sure if he's on the stream right now.
I don't know if he is. Say hello, Mac.
Yeah, what time would it? He's in Poland, so
yeah,
it's
9:30 at night for Mac at the moment. So yeah. he may not be around.
Yeah. Sure. So we're entered into a hackathon together right now. I think it's a 10-day hackathon, and this will be due on Sunday.
Nice.
And we had an original idea that we talked about with Peter a couple weeks ago, which was taking a bunch of JavaScript console emulators. So we were thinking Game Boy, just all kinds of Nintendo systems, and putting together a cloud-hosted site for where you could upload your ROMs and enter these different emulators.
Nice.
And we decided for the scope of this hackathon, it would be a lot more practical to pick an emulator and flesh that out. So Mac's been putting together this. This has literally just been since Monday. He's got all this up here. Or is it Monday or Friday? This full, almost entirely functional website for you can upload ROMs, and then we're using I believe this is the emulator we're using, which is
right.
Click on GitHub, a JavaScript emulator for the Game Boy Color. So
It
going
blows
forward,
my mind that emulators can be implemented in JavaScript, and I know that you can see from the date of
mhm,
this project, this is not a new thing. You know, emulators for various 8-bit platforms have been implemented using
yeah,
JavaScript over the years.
yeah,
It
12 years
it
ago.
does boggle my mind that that's a thing.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially, with some of these systems that, predate JavaScript by so long.
Yeah,
Um,
amazing. So I think we might have to get you and Mac back on. I know you said that the hackathon is going to conclude at the weekend,
mhm,
but I think we
yeah,
might have to get you both on to look specifically at this
mhm,
and talk through
okay,
like because I've entered game jams in the past, for
mhm,
example, which are always interesting learning experiences. So
mhm,
I'd be interested to learn more about what you've created and how
mhm.
you've delivered it. I think
Y-
that would definitely be interesting.
Yeah, we definitely plan on maintaining this, beyond the end of the hackathon.
Cool.
The plan I have going forward within the next few days for this is once Mac gets the live version, up to a minimum level, I'm going to branch and try to create a quick like Dockerized self-hosted version.
Oh no! Oh,
See if
that'd
I
be
can
cool.
play around with that. Yeah. Um, so that's that project. And the other kind of thing I've been looking into was the AI image generation. Um, so this is an open source project. Uh, I'll give a disclaimer. It says DALL-E Mini, not affiliated with the DALL-E or DALL-E 2 OpenAI project.
Right.
Uh, this is a different open source model hosted by Crayon.com. Uh, and what I've been doing here is they have instructions for self-hosting their image generation model, and I've been seeing how I can improve upon that and maybe make it a lot more compact. Because right now, the way the build works is you're basically copying an entire you have an image that's managing an entire workspace with this Jupyter notebook, which has actually more functionality than I think most users are looking for,
Right.
and the image is weighing upwards of 8 GB.
Okay.
Yes. And again with uh high load times for even once you're in the notebook bringing in the model every time. I'm right now on my desktop am working on a more uh, compact Python app to get this running, which was much more difficult than I thought it would be, given all of the uh, specialized sort of functions going on here. There's one of the more difficult things is it's based off of the NVIDIA.
Right. I
Um,
was going to ask about that. So
yeah.
you need the like the CUDA SDK or something. So
Yep.
how does that work with in the constraints of a container?
Right. So this is the Docker file for it. Uh, I don't exactly understand everything that's going on underneath the hood, I'll be honest,
Okay.
with this NVIDIA stuff. I've been having a little bit of difficulty making the everything cooperate with my graphics card. Uh, uh, but I've been making some progress, thankfully. Uh,
Okay.
Today even. Yeah.
So I think when we were talking the other day, you were talking. You're explaining to me that you've recently upgraded your system so that you're
hmm
actually able to run this not on the computer that you're
hmm
using now, but on a workstation that you've got next to you.
hmm
So I think so this is something I'm very interested in as well.
hmm
So there's a project that I'm involved in, and a friend of mine runs a supercomputer for the University of London,
hmm
and he's been sort of at the bleeding edge of running these different sort of AI models for generating images using the disco diffusion stuff, and then DALL-E 2, and one
hmm
of the other models that I forget the name of. And for one of the projects I work on earlier in the year, he generated me artwork that we used as the wallpapers in the operating system that I create, when they were absolutely fantastic. I'd be really interested in taking a look at like the containers that you've been working on and the optimizations that you've found. And maybe we'll see if we can get Simon to join us and actually run these things on a supercomputer, because he can spit out the images in a fraction of the time we can on our sort of albeit decent but nevertheless consumer grade GPUs.
Yeah, I mean, that would be awesome, having access to a supercomputer for this kind of thing. And fingers crossed on I know Simon has access, and I believe you do as well have access to the DALL-E 2 beta right now. Fingers
I
crossed on that opening
don't,
soon.
but some friends of mine do. So my invite hasn't come through. But yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting because we were talking about hackathons and things. I was considering maybe entering another hackathon at some point in the future and writing another game in a game jam. And the thing I struggled with last time I entered a game jam was artwork, because I am no artist. So I was thinking about having AI generate the art assets for the game. And I have another friend of mine who's doing precisely that right now, although not for a computer game. They are into D&D and desktop games, and they're using the artwork to generate the cards for the D&D games that they're playing.
Yeah, I've actually done exactly that using
Oh, really?
yeah, I've used the DALL-E the crayon model for
Right.
generating artwork for my D&D games. I think it's funny from a perspective of, somebody that's around a lot more like software computer science people than I am artists.
Yeah.
I find the computer science people see all the positive and are really excited about being able to create their artwork like this, and the artists are kind of sweating and getting nervous that this is going to catch up.
Yeah, I've seen those debates as well. So I think it's useful for somebody like me to create prototype or proof of concept or placeholder artwork, even for brainstorming ideas that you could then give to a proper design studio and say, here are some rough ideas, create a professional work from this. So I see it as a useful prototyping tool.
Yeah,
but then
that's
again, I'm not an artist, so maybe I don't recognize all of the concerns that an artist might.
Yeah, I've definitely had the thought before where I've seen some of the really detailed images that have been generated, especially like the more like fantastical ones, people doing stuff in outer space, and they've definitely made me think of like, if you remember like the original like concept art for like Star Wars, where all these like creators come out with all this concept art before you like flesh out the rest of the world.
Right.
And I think that is one of the most immediate applications that
Yeah.
it might be having.
I've seen Simon do precisely that. Another friend of mine asked him to generate an image of a Romulan bird of prey flying in over a sun-drenched, insert name of a planet I can't remember, landscape, and amazingly it did. And this was using the Disco Diffusion model. And it was amazing to sit there and watch it actually sort of turn initially some static into this work, and you could tell it was very stylized and Star Trek alike. It was quite impressive. And so yeah, for doing storyboarding, for example, for maybe theatre and film, it could be an extremely useful tool. We had a couple of questions. So Ali's joined us. Hello, Ali. Ali asked, does it still need a patched Docker host? And I think what Ali's referring to here is running these CUDA workloads inside a Docker container. And I can see that BigPod has answered this question. And BigPod says that NVIDIA shouldn't require patched Docker these days, as far as BigPod knows. And again, I haven't done a load of work with the CUDA SDK inside Docker containers recently,
Mhm.
but the last time I did, I didn't need to use the NVIDIA patched version of Docker. Vanilla Docker had all of the necessary capabilities in order to do that. Although I did use the NVIDIA container runtime, I think it's called, which does all of the linking of the NVIDIA user space on the host to inside the container to make sure that all of the ABI is compatible. I think there's definitely scope for us to do a dive into using NVIDIA and CUDA inside containers in a live stream soon, because, just talking through things like AI/ML generated artwork and also things like running games inside containers, I think we've got a couple of opportunities. I mean, maybe not Game Boy games, but we could find some other examples where we might want to hand off some to a GPU for processing. So I think our podcast says they would be very interested in such a stream. So maybe we'll get our heads together and start figuring out what that might look like, Steve, and we can, because I think we've both got the capability to cook up some legitimate examples based on that. And Eric also mentioned that they were at a recent RStudio conference, and there was a dedicated workshop for creating generative artwork from R. So that's interesting. So Eric, was that all done in software, or was that passing off to GPUs? Do you know? I'd be curious to know how that was done. Wow. Okay. So I think we've got a lot of common ground here, because I'm also a retro gaming nerd. So, and I find that the project that you're working on, sticking some retro games inside containers, maybe I can. It'll be a bit delayed. I'm not going to be available up to the end of this game jam, but when I get back, maybe I'll share with you and Max something we could cover on a stream. I've got the game that I entered into a game jam approximately this time last year, and to cut a long story short, there's a version of that game that's exported as WebAssembly. So I think it should be possible to stick that game inside a Docker container and deliver that game via Docker, which, until you were explaining what you've been working on with Cloudy Boy, I hadn't considered doing, but I think that could be a fun little project to look at. And I have another very curious game, which is difficult to deliver to people to play, and I think Docker could be or containers could be the answer. So yeah, maybe we'll see some fun and games with curious games in containers at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no shortage of interest in retro games right now.
Right.
I don't think it's dying anytime soon. So I think would definitely be a lot of interest in moving some of this stuff onto containers.
Okay. And Eric has got back and said that those are generative artworks were all done in software, so no GPUs for that one. Thanks for that, Eric. And thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much for dropping by here. I hope that wasn't too hideous at the first stream. Thank you for taking us through your origin story with containers and everything that you've been working on in order to sort of learn more about containers and Docker Slim and Slim.AI. I think that sparked a couple of good discussion points for us to come up with some streams in the future, and I'm particularly interested in digging into the let's do some CUDA and GPU pass through with containers and see what examples we can cook up. So I think that's definite one for us to investigate. That'll be fun, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for joining me. And thank you everyone for following along and watching, and your questions and comments in the chat. It was lovely to see you all here. I don't believe there's going to be a stream next week due to summer vacations and what have you. So follow us on Twitter and join our Discord. You can find all of those links at the URL above my head. And you'll be notified when we next go live. And I think that there's a strong possibility that there's going to be something fun based off the back of this conversation. Maybe we can fuse together the work that we've done recently on highly optimized Raspberry Pi operating systems and base images, and maybe get Cloudy Boy running on a hosted Raspberry Pi using our own operating system and base images. We'll join all this madness up into one big sort of expose.
Sounds like a crossover episode.
Yeah, I think we definitely got the gumption to do this. I think that would be a fun one to have a go at. Right, well, thank you everyone for coming. We're going to put a bow on it there. We look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thank you all very much for coming. Thanks, Stephen.
Thanks, Martin.